The same is the periods of English literatures, including periods of both English and American literature. The Old English or Anglo-Saxon period. The earliest texts written between the 8th and the 11th centuries are called Old English or Anglo-Saxon. The number of texts which have been handed down from this period is very small, comprising anonymous magic charms, riddles, and poems, such as the Seafarer or the Wanderer, as well as several epic works, such as the mythological Beowulf or the Battle of Malden, which is based on historical facts. Middle English period. When England was conquered by the French-speaking Normans in the 11th century, a definite rupture occurred in culture and literature. From the later half of this Middle English period, a number of texts from various literary genres have been preserved. The Romance, a new genre of a secular kind, is developed in this period and includes the anonymous Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur. This form indirectly influenced the development of the novel in the 18th century. Middle English literature also produced cycles of narratives, such as Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Renaissance. The English Renaissance is also called the Early New English period, a term which focuses on the history of the language, and the Elizabethan Age, or the Jacobean Age, divisions based on political rule. Particularly notable in this period is the revival of classical genres, such as the epic with Edmund Spenser's Faery Queen and the drama with William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and others. The prohibition of drama for religious reasons and the closure of public theatres during the Puritan interregnum greatly influenced English literary history. The outstanding literary of this time were written by John Milton, whose political pamphlets and religious epics mark both the climax and the end of English Renaissance. 18th century. The next period, which is commonly regarded as an independent epoch, is the 18th century, which is also referred to as the Neoclassical, Golden, or Augustan Age. In this period, classical literature and the literary theory were adapted to suit contemporary culture. Authors such as Alexander Pope, Joseph Addison, and Jonathan Swift wrote translations, theoretical essays, and literary texts in a variety of genres. Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, Samuel Richardson's Pamela and Clarissa, Henry Fielding's Tom Jones, and Lawrence Stern's Tristram Shandy marked the beginning of the novel as a new literary genre. It soon assumed the privileged position previously held by the epic or romance and became one of the most productive genres of modern and literary history. Romanticism. At the end of the 18th century, Romanticism marks the beginning of a new period in traditional English literary history. The first edition of the Lyrical Ballads by William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge is commonly considered to be the beginning of a new period in which nature and individual emotional experience play an important role. Romanticism may be seen as a reaction to the Enlightenment and political changes throughout Europe and America at the end of the 18th century. In addition to Wordsworth and Coleridge, the most important representatives of English Romanticism include William Blake, John Keats, Percy B. Shelley, and Mary Shelley. Realism and Naturalism. America and England generally followed the course of the most important international literary movements. Toward the end of the 19th century, representatives of realism and naturalism can be found in both countries. Realism is often described as a movement which tries to truthfully describe reality through language. Naturalism, on the other hand, concentrates on the truthful portrayal of the determining effects of social and environmental influences on characters. American novelists such as Mark Twain, Henry James, and Kate Chopin, and English authors such as Charles Dickens, William Thackeray, Charlotte and Emily Bronte, and George Eliot are among the outstanding representatives of this era, which in England roughly coincides with the Victorian Age. Modernism. English and American modernism can be seen as a reaction to the realist movement of the late 19th century. Modernism discovered innovative narrative techniques such as stream of consciousness or structural forms such as collage or literary cubism. Modernism is a blanket term which encompasses extensive literary innovations in the first decades of the 20th century, which manifest themselves under the influence of psychoanalysis and other cultural historical phenomena. The main works include James Joyce's Ulysses, Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse, Gertrude Stein's Three Lives, Ezra Pound's The Countess, Thomas Eliot's The Waste Land, and William Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury. Postmodernism. In postmodernism, modernist issues regarding innovative narrative techniques are taken up again and adapted in an academic, sometimes formalistic way. This literary movement of the second half of the 20th century indirectly deals with the Nazi crimes and the nuclear destruction of the Second World War, while structurally developing the approaches of modernism. Works such as John Butler's Lost in the Funhouse, Raymond Federman's Double or Nothing, and John Fowler's The French Lieutenant's Woman helped the movement to attain recognition in literary criticism. Both the drama of the absurd, including works such as Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot and Tom Stoppard's Travesties, and the postmodern film adapt many elements from postmodern poetry and fiction to suit their medium.